Hello and welcome to Mum's Work and Chaos. We all know the saying, it takes a village to raise a child, but where is that village? Well, I started this podcast to help you find yours, and I'm joined by some amazing guests this season, talking about subjects such as fast fashion, menopause, sex education and teenage behaviour, just to name a few. So join me this season and I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello and welcome to this episode of Mum's Work and Chaos with me, Louise. This week I am joined by Emma. She is a brilliant mum coach, but she also really focuses on something that we hear a lot about but don't necessarily know how to implement, and that is me time. Now, Emma, I'm so happy to have you here with us today. Please tell us a bit more about you and what you do.
Thank you so much for having me. So I'm Emma, I'm a motherhood coach and self-care expert. And my absolute passion is supporting mums who are juggling all of the things, the school run, maybe running their own business, having a career as well, to, I guess, move from that space of overwhelm to a place of having much more balance, having more clarity, having more energy, and really being able to thrive in all different contexts of our life. And so yeah, I'm so passionate about that, and an absolutely fundamental part of that is how we care for ourselves and the ripple effects that absolutely has. And I know it's dead easy for me to sit here and say, oh, we need to make time for ourselves and we need to do that and we should be doing that, and hopefully the perspective that we'll talk about today will hopefully make it a bit easier for mums who are probably thinking, how am I going to do that?
I think it's really difficult, isn't it, as well? Like, you know, there's such a sort of like lack of understanding about how to look after ourselves, how to make time for ourselves, but equally like how important it actually is. Like, you know, I was doing the usual scrolling through Instagram and I came across this little tile that said, I was talking to my therapist today, and she reminded me that if I don't find time to take a break, my body will take a break for me at the most inconvenient time. And I know that I've been there 100%. I'm mum of three. I've got three very energetic girls, and then I also work full-time, just like you, and it can be a real struggle when you're doing the 9 to 5. You've got the kids, you're trying to sort out dinner, clubs, parties, you know, with me as well, it's all the send support stuff with my eldest with ADHD, and trying to work out like just the mental load of it all, and bearing the brunt of that can be really difficult as well. But I think also, before we pressed record as well, you were mentioning as well that there's a real misconception about exactly what me time is. You know, I definitely have fallen foul of believing that I have to carve out a certain amount of time on a certain day to do a thing, and it must be like this. But it's really not like that, is it, Emma?
Absolutely not. And I think, you know, we come at this, I guess, this conversation, and when we talk about self-care in general, you know, it has these huge misconceptions. And I think it's become such a buzzword that actually we have to wade through all of this stuff as parents before we can even get to that point of, you know, taking care of ourselves and actually making it work for us. You know, I think a lot of what we used to see about self-care, and I think it's very much less now, you know, but that it was, you know, getting our nails done, getting our hair done, having a spa day, having a bubble bath, etc., etc. And don't get me wrong, all of those things are absolutely lovely. However, they're not achievable for many of us at kind of the quantity that we need them to be happening. And so that can become such a barrier, because actually for those things, the things that I've just kind of described, you know, we feel like it needs to be this kind of allotted, dedicated time, you know, an hour, 2 hours, half a day, you know, whatever it might be. And actually that time needs to be where we're not with our kids or we're not with our partner. It needs to be time that we spend on our own. And then that adds this other layer of guilt in that actually we're taking time for ourselves, and there's that kind of selfish element, and we're missing out on time with, you know, our kids, etc., etc. And so I think it's a huge complex picture. And actually, if we really break it down and we kind of look at what it actually is, it's fundamentally about how we care for ourselves. And that can be a million different things. But ultimately, those things should be things that help to raise our energy and that actually, you know, help us navigate those times when maybe our kids are having a tantrum, or maybe they've had a tough day at school and, well, this has happened and that has happened. And actually, we can navigate those systems much better when we are more resourced, when we have more energy, you know, when we are able to be more patient, we are able to be more grounded in that moment. And ultimately that comes from caring for ourselves.
Yeah, I definitely, like, you know, my eldest is 8, my middle one is 4, only just turned 4, she's starting school in September, and then my youngest is 2 and a half. And the tantrums and the things that happen after school, after nursery, the, you know, inability to regulate their own emotions. And I think as well, you know, they come home, they're in their safe space, they're going to let rip, aren't they?
Absolutely.
But sometimes it can be really difficult to regulate our own emotions around those times as well. You know, we've been at work, we've been up early, we've done the school run, we've done a day of people juggling, job juggling, and now we're back to small people juggling again. And it can be quite a tough transition when you don't have those breaks between, like, I mean, I work remotely, full-time remotely, and so literally my commute is the school run. It's the short walk to the end of the garden where my office is. And so it can be quite a lot when you don't have that, you know, even just some like time in the car, on the train, to transition between those different environments can be, you know, quite important. But yeah, like you said, having that space to you know, re-energize, you know, fill your cup back up again is so important when having to deal with those strong emotions from everyone else around you as well, isn't it? Because I am definitely, you know, a victim of falling foul to bouncing off their own emotions as well and throwing them back at them. It can be quite difficult, can't it? So what does me time really look like? What sort of activities are we talking about?
So I think the first thing when we think about me time and taking that time, ultimately it needs to fit around what we're already doing. So looking at our day and looking at the time that we actually have within that space. And when I say time, I mean 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. And then let's build on that as we build those healthy habits. What we do for that time ultimately needs to be led by what we need, what is achievable in our life right now. A lot of the mums that I work with, you know, they absolutely used to love to read before they became a mum. Yeah. And, you know, so you might have read maybe a chapter, half a chapter, or maybe even a full book in one sitting because you had that time. And now actually that's completely unachievable. And so even starting to read then feels like, well, what's the point? Because I'm not going to get to read the amount that I used to. And so we're adding all this expectation and pressure to actually that practice already. And so I think it's really important that we break that down. Actually, if reading is something that you know is going to fill your cup up and is going to give you energy, is going to allow you to rest, allow you, you know, your brain to switch off a bit and really kind of refill that energy tank so you are more resourced, then we need to find a different way to make it work in the context of how our life looks right now. And I think that's really important to remember, actually, you know, when we're on our motherhood journey, you know, it's changing so fast. You know, how one week looks can be very different to how another week looks. You know, there's different periods in that yearly cycle, let's say, that are super busy. And then there's times when it's much quieter and we maybe have more of that time. So we take reading as an example because I think it's probably something that quite a lot of people can relate to.
Yeah.
Actually, let's break that down. Why don't we just read, you know, a page? Or if you are someone who, you know, has to sit outside the bedroom while the kids are going to sleep, maybe you're still in that phase, instead of scrolling on Instagram or whatever it is you might do, take your book and do that, you know, or listen to an audiobook. you know, put those headphones in maybe while the kids are in the bath and you're doing that, or maybe while you're doing the cooking or the washing, maybe on the walk, you know, if you walk to the school, you know, you do the school run via walking, or even if you're in the car, maybe, you know, you listen to the kids stuff on the way when you drop the kids off, and actually when you get back in the car, that's your reset, you put your audiobook on. I think also involving your kids in that process is really key. Like, mummy's just going to listen to her book right now. You know, you're colouring, you're doing whatever. Mummy's still here, but she's got her headphones in and she's listening to her book.
Yeah.
What I did a little bit with my daughter is when I was doing some training, like, my daughter is quite terrible at going to sleep, and so it needs to be as boring as possible. So for me to make that time as well, this was the time when she, you know, she was still like falling asleep in my arms, and she still kind of needed that contact to go to sleep. And instead of, you know, we'd read her book, and then instead of me, you know, sitting there scrolling on my phone, because she had a little nightlight on, as she fell asleep, I would read. And often I'd read out loud. So she's like, oh, mummy's talking like some really boring, like coaching stuff that actually has no relevance to me.
Yeah.
But I'm still getting that, you know, from what I need from that in that time. So I think
used to do exactly the same thing with my eldest. So I you know the like the first year's mummy book that everyone has.
Yeah.
And so like because you know she was my first, and I didn't grow up around kids and things as well. I would read her that out loud, and I'd be like, oh, you're on this stage now, blah blah blah, and tell her boring bits about, oh, you should be doing this now, and you should be telling me, you should be able to say at least 3 words, and blah blah. But yeah, I know exactly that. And sometimes I do. We have like this chair on the landing upstairs, and a table with a light. And so sometimes I do that as well. I'll take a book up, and you know, if they're particularly rowdy or finding it difficult to settle, then you have to sit and do sentry duty. And it would be, go back to bed, get back in bed. But at least I can get a couple of pages in while I'm doing that. But I even find one thing that's become like a ritual for me as well is, as soon as I've like finished work, I lock up my office, I walk back down the end of the garden, I get into the kitchen, I put the kettle on, and I make myself a cup of tea. And just having that cup of tea is sort of like my transition ritual drink. That's how I go from work to now I'm home, and then I can start cooking the dinner. But even just like having that one cup of tea, it seems to really make quite a big difference to getting ready for them to come back through the door.
I think it's really amazing, isn't it? The really simple things that then make the massive difference. And then when we don't do them, or, you know, our day's a little bit different, and so actually it gets forgotten because we are so busy and consumed with everything else, the kind of the noticing of the impact that the lack of that has. And I think those transition periods are really, really important, you know, getting back in the car after the school run, or even arriving, you know, in an afternoon to pick the kids up, and actually, you know, trying to maybe get there 5 minutes early, and either sitting and just taking some deep breaths, because breathing is also another really simple practice that we can do, and we can do throughout our day as and when we need it. And again, it's something we can share with our children as well. But actually just that kind of, okay, this is the next chapter of my day. I'm, you know, grounded now in this space, and then being able to cope with that much easier, you know. And an example of that for me, you know, I started my journaling again over the Christmas period, and obviously Christmas, you're completely out of routine anyway.
Yeah.
So I could journal in the morning because it didn't matter, because the kids were doing whatever, and actually there was no rush, or if we're going somewhere, I'd just take it in the car because I wasn't driving, so I could just sit in the passenger seat and kind of do that practice, and that would really help me set my intention for the day. But then you go back to it full time, and you've got the school run to do, and you're doing this, that, and the other, and actually that journaling in the morning is no longer achievable because there's chaos. So
yeah,
actually, for me, I kind of changed that up, and now I do that process when I get to work. So I drop my daughter at school, and then I'll, you know, arrive at kind of my teaching, full-time teaching job, and I'll just take those kind of first 2 minutes while my computer switches on. I've made myself a cup of tea, and I'll just spend 2 minutes setting my intentions, reflecting on the day before. And it's no more than like 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Actually, the practice of really setting my intentions from the day, really grounding into that space after, you know, the drive to work, the rush out of the house for the school run, actually just helps really reset that for me. And so I think, you know, kind of the examples that we've both given, actually, it's about looking at what we're already doing,
yeah,
and working out how we can change that up in a really simple way, so that actually we are getting the benefit of those really simple things that bring us joy, that raise our energy, that make us feel fulfilled, and not adding those extra expectations to actually is something that is so fundamental to us being able to show up as the best version of ourselves. And not just for our kids, because I know that kind of phrase gets bandied around quite a lot, like you need to take care of yourself to, you know, be a better mom and take care of your kids better. And actually, yes, that is absolutely important. Also, it's about us, because we are still a person, and what we need is still absolutely valid. And how we model that then in terms of taking care of ourselves and the value that we're placing on that, you know, how we model that for our children and the ripple effect that then has, because we are able to show up as the very best version of ourselves. Ultimately, it starts with us first.
I, like you were saying about the journaling, I actually really struggle with, I've always struggled with keeping a diary, with planning. I could get really, really into it and hyper focus on planning, and then like a couple of weeks later, it's all out the window, and and I really, really struggle with that. But something that I found last year was I was given a diary. My mum buys one every year, even though I say don't bother, I don't use it. I use it for like the first month or two, and then I just fall flat on my face with it. But she bought me one with a month to view page in it, and I fobbed off all the other pages, the weekly, the daily pages, just didn't even bother using them, and I was using the month's review, and it worked really, really well. I just needed like something where I could just open it and say, oh, okay, this week, and see the whole block in one go. You know, a bit like your Outlook or Google Calendar, you know, just needed something like that. But I find writing on paper really brings my brain to life, you know. Working on a computer all day every day, and so like actually like typing something, it feels like impersonal, you know, because you make that association like you're just writing to someone who, you know, you're just getting a job done, whereas actually writing on paper, it's like writing a card to someone you really love, isn't it? It makes it so much more personal. So we have the calendar on the fridge, but I also have my new diary, and I've got the month to view, and I've got a page that tracks, you know, important payments. I remember to pay daughter's dance lessons and stuff like that. But it had 2 bullet journal pages for each month, and I've always wanted to do bullet journaling, but you know, again, never felt creative enough to do it. So I went on you know, very well-known website that does next day delivery, and myself, you know, one of those little cheapy label printers that prints, you know, like black and white, and I started printing photos of the week, and then in that week I would fill out this, you know, this bullet journal page with pictures, and then just do some little doodles around the outside and stuff. And I've actually kept at it every Monday. I look back over the week I've had. I fill out on the days a little bit more information about the day of the photo and everything. And it gives me a chance to like reflect and remember the good bits of the week, because I think it's so easy to focus on, you know, how crap you were at dealing with this particular situation, or how you shouted too much trying to get everyone out to school on time, or how you forgot to tumble dry the towels for swimming or something, you know. And it's so easy to focus on the negative, that instead I decided I would print pictures of all the positive things and write down all the positive things during that week in the daily slots, and it's made so much difference. And instead of having to like journal every day, it's less pressure because I'm doing it once a week. I set it aside for this particular time, and it's just something that has been, I've definitely noticed a big difference over the course of the last 5 months doing it, because it's just, again, there's no pressure. If you do it, you do it. If you don't, you don't. But like, you can always catch up again if you missed a week. And it's so easy because I naturally just take stupid amounts of photos anyway. And then the kids pick up my phone and they take stupid photos as well. And so it's actually quite nice. So sometimes I include the pictures they've taken as well. It just reminds me, like, oh, Indy took this picture of me while I was cooking or something. And it's quite nice to actually like be in a picture. Because what mum is ever in a picture unless we're doing a selfie ourselves. But yeah, it's definitely like helped me focus on the positives of the week as well, and not be so centered on what could I have done better and all of that sort of stuff. But yeah, I mean, like, in your you did a post today which was brilliant, and it was all about like who you are, what you do, who you work with, and all of that sort of stuff. And like, I was reading like the types of people you work with, and it just made me giggle, because I was like, well, that's me, and that's me, and that's me, and that's me, and oh, that's also me, and yeah, that's me. Oh my god. But I've worn so many hats, I've done so many different things. I'm working in corporate now, but before that I was running my own marketing agency, and before that I was a distributor for a bridal company as well. And so I've done all sorts of mad and wonderful things, and I've been a business owner, and I've been an employer, and now I've been employee again, which felt a bit weird transitioning back into that. But so like, but you work with all sorts of people, don't you? So you've got down on your list of the people that you work with, mums wanting to make changes. I mean, I don't think I know a mum who doesn't want to make a change. Wanting to create self-care practices, and I think that's the thing, like, like we were saying, back in the day, well, I say back in the day, probably about 10 years ago, self-care was all beauty stuff, wasn't it? It was like, oh, make time to do your tan and get your nails done and all that stuff, like you mentioned. Mums starting their own businesses. I think that's another thing, isn't it? Like, when you're starting a business, it tends to start off as a side hustle. And so you're having to then carve out the extra time that you may have had for the self-care for the business. And so it can make it even more difficult, can't it, to identify that time, because you're probably working, you're mumming, and now you're working even more. Like, when do we fit this stuff in? Mums who want to get clear on what they want their life to look like, and I think that's another thing as well, isn't it? When you're deep in the depths of mumming, working, and all the othering, like, just mumming in general is hard enough as it is. Like, I was reading another post the other day all about how much money could a full-time stay-at-home mum actually charge for their time, because it's labor, isn't it? Like, it somehow we're fitting in doing the dishwasher and mopping and doing the laundry and everything as well, but if you're at home all the time, that's so much unpaid labor that that isn't accounted for as well. And I mean, it's quite, I was talking to a mum on the school run the other day, and I was like, oh, what do you do? And she was like, oh, I'm just a mum. And I was like, you're not just a mum. like you might not be like working, but you are. Like, being a mum is work. It's hard.
Absolutely.
And, you know, we do have to sometimes even just being mums, find that clarity in our day anyway as well, don't we? It can be
Absolutely.
really tricky, like trying to organise everyone else as well as ourselves. But finding that time, it makes such a difference, doesn't it? And gives you, you know, just that space. And like you were saying, like, I think sometimes it can be very easy for us to feel guilty for doing two things at once, being around our kids, but also finding time to do things on our own. One of my friends, she has older children, and now they are able to, you know, like read books together. Like find the time to say, okay, well, everyone needs to read for school, so now I can sit there and read independently my own book while they're reading independently themselves. So looking forward to that. But she's able to carve out that time now. And but you're right, like sometimes I've got my audio book on, or I'm listening to a podcast while I'm cooking the dinner, and they're getting on with their own stuff as well. Like they've got their toys out and they're having a you know, a little play while I'm cooking. And I mean, there's nothing really, is there, to say that you can't be having me time while doing other things as well, is there?
Absolutely not. And I think, you know, it comes with this absolutely massive preconception that it has to be, you know, we're on our own, you know, that is the time that is me time. And actually, that's not realistic, is it, when we are juggling everything? And also, you know, actually, that, I guess, let's refer to it maybe as quiet time, when, you know, the kids are colouring or the kids are playing, and, you know, we are sat there reading, or maybe we're colouring or drawing or journaling or whatever it is that we're doing. Actually, you are still all present with each other, and actually it's a different level and a different, I guess, engagement in that quality time, that you are still all together. You might all be doing different things, but actually you're all engaging and actually being present. And even though you're maybe quiet because you're doing your reading and they're doing whatever, or, you know, however it looks, actually you're still in that space with them. And it's just, I guess, a reframe of, actually, okay, I get to take care of myself in this way while the kids are still there with me. And also, you know, there's things that you can do with them. You know, if you're sat there colouring and maybe there's some music on, and, you know, that might only last for 10-15 minutes.
Yeah.
But actually, you've had that quality time, you've had that kind of downtime. And that can really help to reset, refocus, fill that energy tank. And we don't need any more, you know, time than those 10-15 minutes. Even just 2 minutes is more than enough where we can fit it in. You know, keeping it absolutely realistic to where we are now. You know, as you were saying about your friend, you know, she can read with her children now, and they can be reading and she can be reading, you know, and that's the space that we're moving to. However, we don't need to wait for that space. We can do something now, just in a realistic way of where we are in our life right now. And that's going to be different for everybody.
Yeah. No, 100%. It's going to look different for everyone, but that's okay. You know, me time is personal to you.
Absolutely.
It's not anything that, you know, just because someone else might not be able to recognize that as me time for themselves, it doesn't mean that it's not working or helping you. So as a coach, what sort of things could a mum expect from working with you?
So I think, really, you know, the kind of the mums that I work with, what they are looking for, you know, you just described it kind of in that post we were talking about that I posted today on social media. But ultimately, they're looking kind of for that space for them to explore kind of whatever it is that they need to, and to really, you know, make those changes. And we talk about changes, like, I'm not meaning like massive life changes. It might actually just be introducing a healthier habit, but they need somebody there to help them through that process of kind of bringing those ideas. As a coach, the space is there for the person who's being coached. It's not necessarily about me at all giving ideas or suggestions. I'm there to kind of handhold you through that process of figuring out actually where you're at and how that's going to work for you. Been working with a client recently.
Like
absolutely.
the idea process,
yeah,
and the accountability side of things.
Absolutely. And that accountability looks different for every different client. You know, some clients really like, you know, have you done this week? Where are you at? And others, it's just, you know, just remember you've got that list, you know, let me know how you're getting on. And, you know, again, you know, it's really personal to that person and what they want to work on.
Yeah.
And it's such a beautiful space to actually see those transformations. I've been working with a client recently who wanted to bring in some different healthier habits. And actually, as we worked through kind of, you know, where she was at, you know, she was feeling quite lost in her life and it was very, very busy. And actually, what she's realized is that she does have the time to add in those self-care practices. And ultimately, that's often what I start with clients, because if we're able to care for ourselves, but in a way, and we're able to feel resourced, then we can work towards making those changes and actually have more clarity in where we want to be. And actually, it might be then a small change we need to make, because actually we can see the picture really clearly of what our life looks like. And so she's been bringing in more self-care practices, and we were talking about kind of, you know, how are you going to schedule that and structure that, you know, in your week, in your day. And that's something that we discussed, and that has worked really well for her. And she's like, my God, I've actually got like way more time than I thought I had to make time for me, and I can go and do that, and I can go and, you know, bring that in. And she's like, this really small change has made such a massive difference.
Yeah.
And that kind of, you know, transformation is incredible to see, because ultimately that one small thing has massively changed how she sees her life.
Oh, it's amazing. So if we've got someone listening today who is like, actually, I need to sort something out, I need to start working on me, start finding that time to just get me back, re-energize myself, and you know, to be able to be there more for everyone. How would they get in touch? How would they start working with you?
So there's a few different ways that kind of I offer in terms of, you know, services. So ultimately, a really good way to kind of, I guess, have a conversation with me and see kind of what support would work best for you. Again, what works for you in your life right now, is to pop me a DM either on Instagram or Facebook, or email me, or head over to the website and just fill in the contact me form. We can have a chat in any of those spaces. And then we can look at kind of actually what's going to work for you right now. You know, I work in a few different ways when I coach clients, because we are busy mums, and ultimately sat on a video call for a lot of mums is really unachievable, because then we need that dedicated time, and we need to be not have those distractions and not have those interruptions. And then we also need time to then action kind of what we've discussed in those sessions as well.
Yeah.
And so I've been coaching clients through voice notes and messages, and that's absolutely beautiful, because they can access it, you know, when they arrive to the school run earlier, and we can work through that process over a longer period of time, you know, through a couple of days, to, you know, when we're looking at kind of one topic. But ultimately, you know, for me, when I work with mums, it's all about making it accessible and simple and flexible, because that's what we need.
Yeah.
So there's one-to-one coaching in those kind of different formats. And also, again, because we need things to be accessible and simple, there's a range of on-demand self-paced courses as well. So instead of having to, you know, schedule that time to attend a live workshop, which, you know, live workshops are absolutely incredible, but often we can find ourselves watching them on the replay anyway. Or we've had to pause it halfway through because kids needed us or whatever. So the range of some of my signature courses available for on-demand self-paced as well. And obviously there's the podcast. So if you want to listen to kind of more of, you know, more chat on self-care and motherhood, and simple things that we can kind of bring into support over on the Self-Care and Motherhood Edit podcast as well.
Amazing, that's brilliant, thank you so much. And if you're listening and you do want some more information, just scroll down and you'll find all the links to everything that you need in the show notes today, as well. And also, if you're listening and you think, okay, I'm already doing a few of these things, it's nice to know that I'm on the right path, but someone who is really, really struggling and might find this podcast useful, please also do share with them, share with your friends, send them the link, and share the love. But Emma, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. You'll also find Emma's guide over in the resources section of the website as well. So do head over to mumsworkandchaos.co.uk, and you'll find some more information there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode of Mums, Work and Chaos, please make sure to subscribe on whatever podcasting channel you're listening on at the moment. Or if you'd like to get involved, feel free to email me at mumsworkandchaos@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram at mumsworkandchaos. See you then.